Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. This podcast is about how the paradigm for data access has changed. Data allows businesses to build products faster, make more informed decisions, and increase both revenues and profits. Yet, in today's decentralized world, getting data to the remote workforce, to distributed applications, and even to things like artificial intelligence engines is a challenge. Data Unchained digs into the challenges and solutions to make data a globally accessible resource. I have two great guests today that are deeply immersed into the technology as well as the pain points that customers have in dealing with these decentralized environments. So welcome. I have Chad Smith from HP Anywhere and Mike Bott from Hammerspace. Appreciate you both jumping on. So I've had the pleasure to work with both of you in various formats and roles over the years. But for our audience, maybe Mike, if we could start with you, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and then kind of what is your passion in this space and how technology is helping with these issues?
I'm about 25 years deep in a storage engineering career. I've been a systems architect, developer. I've run teams, but I love startups. I love building software. I love building teams, and most of my focus has been on HPC and media and entertainment for the entirety of my career. So big systems, very high aggregate throughput, and then along with all the specialized high throughput and large compute stuff that media entails. I've been with a variety of storage companies. Hammerspace is the latest one I've been at. I'm almost a year old here now.
So tell us a little bit more in media and entertainment, for example. What is the role of data? I think most of us think about media and entertainment as about going to the movie theater or onto Netflix and seeing content. Kind of how does that tie to the technology work that you do?
So it's been fun to actually be on the IT side in the bowels of the media and entertainment industry, because even when it was just film, a lot of that stuff was still being run through as data before it was turned back into film to show in the theater. So even a while ago, we were dealing with very large data sets and very high throughput. I'm talking, several gigabytes a second a decade and a half ago. So the media entertainment has always been on the bleeding edge of performance, and I have a lot of fun playing in that environment. The flip side is also true too. If you're not just trying to send a whole lot of data to a single machine so they can view a very high resolution image, you're trying to send a lot of assets to a lot of machines so that they can draw pictures for you. They can create pictures for you in animation or in visual effects. So there's tons of compute and tons of network bandwidth and tons of storage used for these things. A common example I like to throw out is simulation today. You can use compute farms to simulate the behavior of fluids in very large volumes and then use that information to create beautiful looking frames of film that escape the uncanny valley, where the smoke, the fire, the water all just looks very believable, even though it's an animated picture. And what folks have been finding out is using more and more storage capacity for simulation leads to better looking results. And so that's an example of one very compute intensive driver of storage capacity in the industry that's just growing.
You mentioned HPC, that's high performance computing, if folks aren't familiar with the acronym. And generally when people think of high performance computing, they're thinking of science. Maybe it's weather forecasting, it's genomic sequencing, things like this. Is heavy research, but there's a lot of HPC in media and entertainment as well. Wouldn't you say that that's true, that these really performance intensive, data intensive markets, there's a lot of commonality in the technology that solves their needs?
Absolutely. Like some of the access patterns might differ, some of the actual geometry of the data can differ a bit, but the end job is getting a lot of bits into these memory spaces that you can run compute against, and you're trying to do that in parallel because your problem is embarrassingly parallel. So when you have 100 frames of film to render, you hand each frame to a different machine and give all those machines the assets. And there's all this stack of software that deals with handing those assets out. But the end result is you have to build these storage systems large enough that they can deliver data to the machine farm so that the machine farm isn't waiting on I/O to start rendering. That's usually a game, and it's exactly the same game inside the traditional HPC markets that you mentioned.
Awesome. Chad, let's hand things over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So much like Mike, I've been 20 plus years in the industry. At the beginning of the pandemic, I decided to make a transition over into the remote desktop space. I saw an opportunity and need to have these M&E workloads that Mike had just described run remotely, geographically dispersed, right, where the individual couldn't make it into the office to work on these clusters, but yet they needed access to that remotely. And that's kind of where I saw the value in making a transition over. I'm now working for a company called Teradici, which is under the umbrella of HP Systems. We got acquired back in October. So it's been quite a journey for us as a part of this acquisition and having more and more exposure to, high-end compute and the needs and wants of people, of course, in the M&E industry and other verticals as well.
One of the things I've always found interesting kind of watching your career path, Chad, is you've been involved in a lot of the new technologies that are coming out. When we worked together years ago, when cloud was first coming about, this idea of the cloud was fantastic. Everyone was so excited about the opportunity it brought, but actually deploying technology in the cloud is not easy. And it's not the same as a traditional IT administrator's skill set. So I think it's interesting that you've really leaned in on figuring out how to move technology kind of out of the data center further from that kind of center of mass. But what's driving that kind of interest for you?
In general, it's just the need for elasticity, right? And I think what we mentioned earlier about the pandemic and this need to work from home and having new and different workflows available remotely really kind of calls to what the advantages of cloud are. Right. So just kind of following the trends and looking at there's all kinds of automation tools that you can take advantage that speak specific cloud APIs that facilitate a lot of these workflows to be elastic and to allow individuals to control costs. You're never going to get rid of the corporate office. You're not going to get rid of the corporate data center, but they have the ability to burst dynamically out to the cloud. Was really interesting to me, and it really played well into Teradici's use case. We were one of the first protocols in cloud. We support all three clouds and, of course, on-prem. So it really naturally played well for us as these individuals migrated to take advantage of resources in the cloud, that we were there to make that transition with them.
That's a great segue into one of the topics we wanted to talk about, Chad. So thinking about remote workforce or remote users, is this new just in the last couple of years since COVID occurred and the workforce migration we're all aware of, or has this industry been dealing with that challenge longer than that?
I think the industry in general has had a requirement for remote use cases and remote workers. If you look at the history of Teradici, we originally started as a hardware organization making dedicated cards and what we refer to as zero client. We kind of coined that term in the industry. And that was really to chase stock traders that were basically too remote from Wall Street, but they had to be close enough to make their trades on time with a low enough latency. So that was kind of the pedigree that Teradici first got started in. And we've been around for over a decade before the pandemic hit. But since the pandemic hit, it really has shown a spotlight on this remote use case where people needing to remote into powerful, highly available machines to do their work, to augment their existing workflows and workforces.
Are you seeing that as you talk to customers and the studios and visual effects houses that you work with a lot in the media space in particular? Is it primarily that the artists just want to work from their home offices, or is there just a shortage of talent in the major city centers? Kind of what is driving the need for the remote workforce?
You name it, right? It really is all the above. Pre-pandemic, it was chasing tax incentives and geographically dispersed workforces and the talent pools, right? Because they were very geographically dispersed. So that was even pre-pandemic. But the pandemic has really shown that now it has been a focus from work from home, where it has evolved from a necessity to a value add for employee retention, right? So now you're giving them the opportunity to work from home 3 days, 2 days out of the week as an incentive to keep them employed within an organization. So it really has evolved and changed.
And there's definitely been a massive increase in the amount of content under demand and being created, right, through things like Netflix and Apple TV and all the different forums that we consume content through. There's just more and more content being created all of the time. Mike, what do you see as the challenges that this remote workforce is kind of trying to overcome, or what is it that makes them able to be productive in these remote environments?
Challenge wise, it's been interesting to watch because, like Chad alluded to, it was kind of happening before, but all the COVID shutdowns ramped a bunch of like sending workers home into high gear. But additionally, in the media and entertainment industry, it shut down principal photography, right? It shut down production, live production. And so, like, you couldn't have audience, you couldn't get crews together, you couldn't bring the talent together. So all of a sudden, people figured out, hey, we've got to pivot to animation. And so you had this giant swell in the demand for animation, and you couple that with the pull through demand of everybody staying at home and watching the various streaming services, and you got kind of this perfect storm that blew animation and visual effects up. It absolutely blew it through the roof. I have seen the most ridiculous growth over the last couple of years in that space, and it has to do with all of those factors I mentioned. And so the growth of the demand for animation, of course, draws everybody into the market. Everybody starts producing animation, and that leads to the problems that Chad was talking about. So you've got everybody hired up in the usual media hotspots. Everybody is hired. Everybody has a job who wants a job in the space. And so now when you're a big studio trying to expand so that you can take on new projects, maybe you're one of the big major studios, or maybe you're a subcontractor for Netflix. It doesn't matter. Everybody has the same problem. You can't hire anybody locally. So now you've got to figure out, now you've got to go elsewhere. And so you have to solve that problem with remote desktops, because most big entities that own intellectual property are not comfortable putting data inside someone else's house when they're just a subcontractor or a remote employee. They want to keep their data within their four walls, which during the pandemic sort of extended to the edge of their cloud footprint. So you've got this case where remote desktop enables companies' security while also enabling them to hire talent wherever. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal in the space.
I remember back, oh gosh, I don't know, 10 years ago when there was a big news about some Sony's content being leaked before the feature film was released, and the massive amount of money that was involved with early leaks of footage. And you can imagine how that's exasperated by this remote workforce all having potentially access to this content. It's an interesting challenge. So this remote desktop idea, I think it would be worth spending just a second here talking about why the cloud isn't enough to solve this problem. And we have these massive companies like Amazon and Microsoft who have these massive cloud infrastructures over the world. Which problem are they not solving? Why can't people just put everything on the cloud?
I'll add that there's a cost component to that, right? And a cloud only makes sense when there's a level of elasticity and there's a price associated to that elasticity. And you need to cost justify that elasticity in order to justify the price, right? So it really is kind of an on-demand situation where you need to burst the cloud to take advantage of these available resources, right? Whereas in the majority of your day-to-day production work will most likely happen in your normal studio type location in business, right?
And if you think about getting data to where it needs to be used, or content, I picture this idea that the way films are made is you stand in Hollywood or Pinewood Studios or somewhere, and you have cameras taking pictures of film. And this idea of animation and visual effects, and maybe also film as well. How does that data get to these remote users? I think that's a fascinating concept. I mean, are we putting film buckets in airplanes, Mike, or like what is the modern version of that?
That's definitely where it started. There was definitely a company. I was with a company in the past that tried to address that directly. But yeah, sneaker netting is real. It still happens. You get in these remote locations and you just don't have any good data options. So you've got to do stuff like that. But there's this other layer, like while you're dealing with an animation workflow where there's might be different people geographically distributed working on different aspects of the same shot, the same data, the same set of assets. And you've got to be able to take changes that one artist is making and make those changes available to another artist. And when you look at the traditional solutions of just the old storage system vendors that are out there, When they talk about making a replica of data in another location, it's an entire directory, or a share or a volume, depending on the granularity of that storage vendor. And to Chad's point, making an entire replica of my 1 petabyte of on-prem data so someone can work on 4 gigabytes of it makes zero sense, especially when the cost of storing that data is at cloud levels, right, where it's per gigabyte per minute. And so you have to pay. You end up having to pay a premium if you're gonna put that whole data set out there. I was on a call a little while ago with someone from one of the big cloud providers, and they were basically stating to the prospect, "Hey, look, we've got the compute, we've got the pipes, we've got the object storage, but we don't have the orchestration. We don't have the thing that moves the data where it needs to be when." And that's kind of where Hammerspace can come in. Hammerspace can provide that data orchestration layer so that you can have a petabyte of data and someone can see the namespace, but they only pull the stuff they need, or one of your production systems only places the stuff they need on the system close to them or close to their virtual workstation.
Yeah, to Mike's point, we've talked to a lot of customers where they've admitted that 80% of their total cost is the cost of storage in the cloud, right? It's not the workstations that you're working off of. It's the cost of keeping that on high performance storage. So if you can mitigate those costs as best you can, again, Molly, that makes, to your point, it changes the economics of running in cloud, right? If you had an orchestration layer that was intelligent enough to shift and move data around on demand, that's part of the problem. And that's the inherent problem of this solution is typically today, it's a manual decision that one has to make. What directories, what files are needed at what time? And it's a balance that has to be, you have to strike between cost and availability, right? And I think that's where the Hammerspace solution is very complementary to ours, is making that decision automatically for the end users.
That sounds incredibly complex to try to do that manually, thinking about the amount of people involved and the amount of content involved and trying to get that right. That sounds like a tough job for at least one and probably a bunch of people in an organization.
Yeah, like pipeline design has included data transfer as a consideration forever. Like I've definitely worked with data transfer companies in the past, and you have to build it in. Like the traditional way of thinking is that I have one workflow step, and then I build a workflow step that transfers data to the next workflow step if those are geographically far flung. And so you're kind of engineering that. But if you think about that process, when you execute the workflow step that copies data somewhere else, you've got a fork of the data now. Okay, the data that transfers to that other system is not coupled at all with the data on the other system, except by the workflow tools. And when you bring in an orchestration solution such as Hammerspace that can move data around on demand or in response to metadata events from external systems, all of a sudden you've kind of raised that water line. Are my hands in the shot? You've raised the water line of what the file system can do to include data transfer. And all of a sudden your thinking can change, because you can know that if someone makes a change to a file for a particular shot in India, very soon that change, and I'm talking seconds, okay? Very soon that change is known about by all the other sites, but it's only pulled if that change is necessary in those other sites, or if an external system tells us to make it happen. And that's a big differentiator. Like I see a lot of parallels, Chad, actually, between the efficiencies that our on-demand plus metadata approach can bring to storage footprints, in kind of the same way that your technology can bring efficiency to workstation footprints in the cloud.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, Mike, because it harkens back to the days of having replication policies that are waterfalling into other replication policies. And it just creates this just complete mess of a replication policy it's just not production ready, right? Whereas in a solution where it's an orchestrating changes across multiple networks, across multiple hubs, and synchronizes it, it's the real value prospect of what Hammerspace brings, right? Is that level of flexibility.
A lot of the folks who join this podcast, and as I get feedback after different episodes, one of the things I hear is folks are joining in to listen because they generally know that the world has become more decentralized, more remote, whether it's infrastructure, people, businesses, whatever it is. And they like to learn from experts who have helped with the transition, gone through the transition. Where do you guys go to learn? So if you're thinking to our audience of who's trying to figure out how to embark on their journey to solve these needs, where would you go to learn? Conferences, things you read, anything like that, user forums?
So I find myself spending a lot, like looking for communities, spending a lot of time. I'm a humongous fan. I'm gonna give a shout out to Studio Sysadmins. I am a big fan of that community, even though they can occasionally be kind of mean to vendors, but that's okay. We probably deserve it. Um, they they discuss everything around running these production studios, and it's mostly focused on visual effects and animation studios, but includes live production stuff as well. And they discuss every topic. There are so many knowledgeable people in there that will respond to a question you ask. I could recommend for folks who are getting started out who really want to learn, that might be a good place to hop in and ask questions. Another place I like to go to learn is in these very focused trade shows. So I don't feel that NAB is that focused around something like this, but something like SIGGRAPH is perfectly focused on this kind of environment. And you can learn tons just by walking around and getting demos from the vendors, talking to the vendors about the problems they're solving. And as a vendor who works these trade shows, I'm totally happy to talk to you, even if you're a student. I will talk to you about what we do and how it helps and why it changes things. And so yeah, those are actually my two favorite places to go learn: focused trade shows and then the really focused internet communities.
That's great, Mike. And I'll do a little plug here real fast. So just finished this book, right? So I kind of do a similar process as Mike, but I like to get a big picture, right? I like to take a look at what is the next mover technology, and how you can practically get to some of these big ideas, right? Everyone's talking about the metaverse, but what is the metaverse? Why the metaverse and when the metaverse, right? So being a technologist, I like to take kind of like what I like to call blocking and tackling technologies and seeing how they'll get to some of these big picture ideas that people are describing today, right? And then further go down that rat hole technically to say, hey, look, if there's a problem with the way that the internet runs, right? How do we fix that, right? How do we consume metaverse, right? How do we enable people that are geographically dispersed to access the metaverse, right? So there's all kinds of ideas. I'm a big picture guy. I love to think about the big, bright, big next thing, right? What's going to push the needle forward? But then you got to take it a couple layers back and say practically what other layers of technology needs to change to enable these bigger ideas, right?
And we spent a lot of time talking about media and entertainment today, and it's such an interesting workflow that I think everyone can relate to because we all consume media in one way or another. But just as we close up, which other industries are struggling with the same kinds of problems? Which other types of customers do you talk to in your just day-to-day jobs?
I'll start off with, we're kind of industry wide, right? Everybody's having the same problem right now. Terry Dici really focuses on the people that need to have a build-a-lossless, color-accurate experience, right? And that's traditionally seen in the M&E industry. But they're not the only ones that are having the same problem, right? People in game tech, people in engineering, architectural, and design are having the same problem. And even people in the Fed space, right? They need security more than they need to build a lossless, but our product provides the security with the build a lossless. We're actually seeing a lot of movement in gas and oil too. I will tell you that we're also seeing an upswing of what we call the task worker. The task worker is now not just working in spreadsheets, but they're actually seeing full motion video as a part of their day-to-day activities, right? And that requirement is pushing them into what we would consider a high graphics use case as well.
Any others that you would add, Mike, or is that pretty comprehensive?
That was pretty comprehensive. Like in the recent past, I've worked with a very large engineering company, a very large aerospace company, a very good sized medical devices company, and I know that these problems exist across biotech and genomics as well. We're talking large data sets with a need to share them across multiple geographies and a need to exchange research data that you get from running against a baseline big data set. Everyone needs access to that. So you could have a situation where tons of that data is being created in one site. It's being consumed by researchers in other sites. Lots of opportunity, I think, mostly, of course, in the industries that create massive amounts of data. Chad mentioned oil and gas, which is another place where we're seeing some upswing as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to Mike's point quickly, too, that the way that they consume the data and interpret the data all has a high visual front end on it as well, right? So even though we're talking about massive amounts of unstructured data, semi-structured data, the way that they view and interpret and model that data is through a high-end 3D visual application, right? So it is running across the gambit where both of our solutions come into play together and across multiple industries.
Thank you both for taking the time to do the podcast. I know you're busy, and taking a moment to kind of share our knowledge is a super cool thing that our industry is great about doing. But thank you both for taking the time today, and perhaps we'll invite you back on a future episode.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Me on. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.